I have a
I want to go
comment.
this way.
I have
Yes.
a comment and one question. The comment is regarding whether the Iranians embraced the Muslim invasion, which, like you say, we don't know. It's not documented what the commoners thought about it. But I think of like the U.S. invasion of Iraq, where Saddam Hussein wasn't exactly a very popular leader. You know, he killed lots of people. So your common Iraqi probably didn't like Saddam Hussein. Nonetheless, they didn't really want a foreign government occupying their their land and their homeland. So in that sense, I think, so my comment is that logic tells me that it cannot be that the majority of the Iranians openly embrace these invaders. And my question is, how about the culture of people during that era, that end of the era of the Sasanians? Like, for example, did they have slavery in Iran at that time?
Okay.
They had it later, but did they have
The way you're going, I mean, I could pick your ideological sort of thing, but the idea of slavery, certainly in Mesopotamia, we have legal text that people could own slaves. You had Bandeg Shahrik, Iranian slave, and you had Bandeg Anshahri, non-Iranian slaves. That is clear from Madigan Hezar Dadistan, for example, 7th century minutes or proceedings of legal cases. Certainly there were slaves. Slavery was quite common in sort of in Eurasia. It's nothing outstanding to pick out about the Iranians, say because they had slavery. No, the Iranians had it, the Romans had it, the Chinese had it. Everyone had slavery. That was a common idea. So this idea of bringing freedom to slaves as sort of these, freedom projects, that was not really part of this mentality of late antique world. Okay. Let me go this way, sir. And yes.
Lack of literature from Islamic era is often blamed on Arabs during libraries and all of things. What's your idea about it?
My idea? Okay. Not that it's the last word there. I think, first of all, I'm now more and more pushing with Professor Ravani. I've been talking and tomorrow. We have a number of Pahlavi texts, some fragments of a few page or half a page, to really major texts, probably 200 or even more. We don't even know on the number of Pahlavi texts we have. After 100 years of research in Middle Persian, we don't still know the name of every text that exists. So, but then we say there's nothing there. So first let's see what's there, and then see what's not there. Now, that is just one aspect. That's my sort of horn that I'm shooting. The other idea is, look, there were various types of literature there, right? What seems to have been of interest to the Muslims, how the king ate, what they did, how to rule the country, cultural texts and so on, were probably translated in Beit al-Hikmah during the Abbasid period, right? This great translation, right? And Dimitri Gutas and others have written on this. And what they're doing is making Khosrow the First court, where they also were translating texts from Syriac and Greek into Persian, and the Abbasids are actually copying that tradition. So the texts that were important were translated into Arabic, and some of them later into Persian. Religious text remains with the Zoroastrians, right? They keep the texts that are important in terms of, so they can't keep up everything, right? Cultural texts, there are very few of them because there's no use, most of them have been translated. And those that are not use of either religious circle or these fall into disuse and you leave. Arabic becomes, by the 8th century, the important language. That's the language you need to keep things. What's the use of having Pahlavi texts on how to, govern in the 11th century? When no one can read it, but there has been this language shift and change. And some of that gets used. Now, there's also destruction. We know, for example, when the Muslims came to Ctesiphon, apparently the archive did caught fire and was destroyed. In East, they were forced actually burning of books further to the northeast, Greater Khurasan. So it depends on the situation and I think the type of text. Sir, please.
So as you said that the Arabs, before attacking Iran, they proposed to the Persian Empire to either become Muslim or...
No, during that fighting. So you go to the city of Ardabil. You say you have choice. You meet the local ruler out there. You want to fight? Okay, but you know, you're going to get killed, slavery, and you have to pay double. Or you pay tribute, we'll let you have your religion, that's fine, just give us tribute. Or just become Muslim and you know, you're part of the learning.
Okay, so can we say that they had more economical intentions behind attacking the other cities, rather than just making other people Muslim and converting?
Well, that depends on your text. Certainly, economic interest is very much important. I think Dr. Prushayati has also emphasized that. It's the economic interest, of course, that here is at play as well with the Arabs and these people. That's certainly viable. Sir?
I was interested to know how much conquering Iran affected Arabs, like even in, because I think Iran has this quality that sort of observes the people who come across it into its culture, like with Mongols, different Turkish tribes, even Greeks to a certain extent. Have you come across any information on how it affected not just Arabs that came to Iran, but Arabs in mainland, in Arabian Peninsula, and how it affected their culture, how it affected their way of living?
I think once the Arabs, of course, settle in Iran, what happens? The end result is they become Persianized or Iranianized. I mean, Persian is a language that survives in other languages. Arabic becomes a language of science, and everybody knows. That is the important language of knowledge. But Persians does survive, and that suggests that these people who come, they settle and they become part of this culture. And I think that what you say as an Iranian, I can put my nationalist bit, is the beauty of this is that you absorb the conquerors, the people who migrate. I detest this idea of purity. That we have this original Aryan blood in all of our DNA, and somehow these others have come. These are just fabrications of 18th and 19th century, with all due respect, European sort of romantic views. That got translated, which I don't want to get into, with people, Mirza Ahani Kermani and Talibov, in Salah Nome and things like that, and that became current, unfortunately, among some of our people. Which has never been the case. Iran has always been a mixed bag, if whatever you call Iran. This Iran has been mixed ideas and mixed bag. Okay, sir.
I was going to say, based on the numbers of Arabs and the vast, area of Iranshahr, it wouldn't make any sense for them to, be able to completely control the whole area physically. But they could maybe, move into certain areas and then pull back and then lead their leaders and have their leaders try to, build the society. And that's probably where you have all the mixing of coinages and slows the constant revolutions. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of mixing because it's such a vast area.
Sure. Sasanians are an urban society, and they're created really on the force of creating cities, and they do a number of them. If you always fly over Iran, you'll see that it's to a large extent it's barren. Not that it's always like that. It's these cities that are important. Remember, how many major cities do you have? How many of these cities can you control to say you control the Iranshahr? Of course, you're not controlling every village and everything. You control the major cities, right? You control Iran. Okay? So I think that's the short answer to the long one. Sir in the back, and then I'm going to come down and go here, and then I'll stop with you. Yes?
So, about this kind of re-emergence of kingship in Iran, what was the extent of the rule, and why is this in Jordan?
Oh, because, Umayyads are centered in Syria and, what we call sort of modern-day Jordan, and Qusayr al-Amra. You have this wonderful, this is sort of more of a propaganda piece, so you have these 6 kings or rulers who are submitting to the Umayyad rulers. In a way, the Umayyads are trying to portray themselves as this continuation of this tradition, and of course Yazgird or Khosrow, whoever that is one of that. So you still find that under the Umayyads, you have sort of a nice Hellenic and Iranian tradition surviving. I want you to get out of this mentality, not you per se, but in general. The Arabs come, devout Muslims, destroy everything else, they're just praying all the time and they don't care about anything. That is not the reality of what we're saying here that is going on. Okay? It's much more complex, depends on who you're talking about. The Khawarij, if you're talking about the Khawarij, they're very different in how they deal, not only with non-Muslim, but also Muslims in early Islam, right? But the Umayyads are not, this is part of the same period of sort of.
What was the extent of like the Iranian kingship, just because you mentioned?
Well, I mean, we see that influences certainly probably until, Syria and so on. It did have an influence, although the Romans also had an influence there as well. Sir? No questions here? Okay. Sir? And then
My question goes back to the archaeology side of your research. Your research is mostly based on the coinage, as you mentioned.
that was when I was much younger.
Yeah. I want to see how certain are we or general scientists are about the age of the coins.
Oh, the coinage actually have dates on it.
Oh, very good.
So it did much better than text, I would say. Oh, most texts. Text, I would say most texts. Anything else? You want to know, I have a couple of books there you could see actually, so they're giving some detail on the Conquest of the Black One, the Sasanian Empire. Okay, nice stuff. Or did you have